Have you ever felt like the person everyone counts on, but no one actually sees? That was me 6 months ago. Scrolling through my social media feed late one night, exhausted after another day of running everyone else's lives, I saw this video of crystal clear water in Bali. The woman filming it was laughing as she jumped from a small waterfall into a natural pool below. I remember freezing, my finger hovering over the screen, thinking, when was the last time I heard my own laugh? Like that? 42 years old, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd done something just because I wanted to. But that moment changed everything. I went from being the reliable family doormat to standing on a black sand beach halfway across the world, all because I finally decided my life was worth living too. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Every morning started the same way. My alarm would go off at 5:30 a.m., and I'd immediately check my phone for the inevitable text from my son Ryan, asking if I could drop off something he'd forgotten at our house, or from my boss Michael with some urgent request that could have waited until business hours. Then I'd start making breakfast for my parents, who moved in with me 3 years ago after my dad's first health scare. "Sarah, is the coffee ready yet?" My mom would call from upstairs, and I'd quickly pour her cup. 2 sugars, just a splash of cream. Dad liked his eggs over easy, not too runny, with exactly 2 pieces of toast. Mom preferred oatmeal with blueberries, but only if the blueberries were on the side, never mixed in. I knew everyone's preferences, everyone's schedules, everyone's needs. That particular Tuesday, as I was setting out Dad's heart medication, next to his plate, my phone rang. It was Megan, my daughter, calling from Seattle. "Mom, could you scan Dad's old military records and email them to me? I need them for this veterans benefits case I'm working on." "I'm heading to work in 20 minutes, honey. Can it wait until tonight?" "The brief is due tomorrow morning, Mom. Please? You know how important this case is for my career." I sighed, looking at the clock. "I'll try to do it before I leave." "You're the best, Mom. Love you." She hung up before I could say anything else. I set my own breakfast aside, just a piece of toast I'd now have no time to eat, and headed to the filing cabinet in the garage. As I was scanning the documents, my dad shuffled in, already dressed in his golf attire despite the rain. "Oh good, you're up. Listen, could you call the golf club and reschedule my tea time for tomorrow? Linda and I decided we want to go to that new breakfast place first." I closed my eyes briefly. "Dad, I told you last week, I have that meeting with Michael tomorrow. It's my annual review. I can't be late." He waved his hand dismissively. "This will only take a minute. Just call them when you get a chance." "Robert, leave her be," my mom said, appearing in the kitchen doorway. "She can do it tonight." Then, without missing a beat, "Sarah, don't forget we need more of my special face cream, the one from the dermatologist. And could you pick up the dry cleaning on your way home?" I nodded automatically, adding these tasks to the mental list I was constantly maintaining. I glanced at the rain-streaked window and felt something inside me sink a little deeper. At work, things weren't much better. I'd been an administrative assistant at Parker Marketing for almost a decade, and while I was good at my job, it had become increasingly clear that I would never advance beyond my current position. Michael, my boss, relied on me for everything, from managing his calendar to remembering his wife's birthday. But when promotion time came around, he always had some reason why I wasn't quite ready. "Sarah, I need the Johnson proposal on my desk by 3 p.m., Michael said, dropping a stack of disorganized notes on my desk. "And reschedule my golf game with Hendricks. Tell him something came up." "The Johnson proposal isn't due until next week," I said, confused. "Well, now it's due today. I want to get ahead of it," he replied, already walking back to his office. I stared at the messy pile of handwritten notes and sticky tabs. This would take hours to organize, let alone turn into a coherent proposal. I'd be lucky to leave by 7 p.m. At lunch, I escaped to a small cafe across the street where I could at least enjoy 30 minutes of solitude. That's when I made the mistake of checking my personal email. "Mom," Ryan had written, "I know this is last minute, but I need to crash at your place for a couple weeks. My roommate's girlfriend is moving in, and it's super awkward. I'll be by tonight." I hadn't seen my son in nearly a month, despite the fact that he lived just across town. The only time he seemed to remember my existence was when he needed something. And now he was moving back in, without even waiting for my response. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia, the only coworker I considered a true friend. "How's the day going? Still on for coffee tomorrow?" I typed back, "Drowning. Might have to cancel. Ryan's moving back and plus Johnson proposal emergency." Her reply came quickly, "Again? When do you ever get a break?" I stared at that message for a long time, Olivia's words echoing in my head. When did I get a break? When was the last time anyone in my life had asked what I needed? Back at the office, I found myself mindlessly scrolling through my phone, between tasks, something I rarely had time to do. That's when the algorithm served me a video of a woman about my age wading into turquoise water in Bali. She looked so carefree, so present in the moment. The caption read, "Quit my job at 45. Now I live in paradise half the year. Best decision ever." I clicked on her profile and fell down a rabbit hole of videos showing lush rice terraces, ancient temples, vibrant markets, and peaceful yoga retreats. In one video, she sat in a tiny cafe, explaining how she'd transformed her life. "I was running myself into the ground for people who barely noticed," she said. "One day I realized no one was going to hand me the life I wanted. I had to take it for myself." Something inside me resonated with her words so strongly that I felt a physical ache in my chest. I quickly closed the app when I heard Michael's footsteps approaching. That evening, I returned home to find Ryan's car already in the driveway. Inside, he'd taken over the living room, his gaming console already hooked up to the TV, empty pizza, boxes on the coffee table. "Hey, Mom," he said, barely looking up from his game. "I ordered dinner. Hope that's cool." "It's fine," I said, setting down my bag and the dry cleaning I'd picked up. "But I thought you weren't coming until tonight." "It is night," he said, gesturing to the darkness outside. "I meant later. I would have cleaned up your room if I'd known you'd be here so early." He shrugged. "No big deal. I just threw all your craft stuff in the closet." My craft stuff. My one hobby, the small pleasure I allowed myself on rare weekend afternoons when everyone else was busy. Now shoved unceremoniously into a closet. "Sarah, is that you?" My mom called from upstairs. "Did you get my cream?" I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and reminded myself that I loved my family, that helping them was what I did, who I was. But later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I found myself back on my phone, watching more videos of Bali, of people who had decided their own happiness mattered, who had made changes I could never imagine making myself. Or could I? The next morning, as I made breakfast, my parents made an announcement that would change everything. "Sarah, we wanted to let you know," my mother began, stirring her oatmeal. "Carefully, your father and I have decided to spend the summer at Cousin Eleanor's lake house in Michigan." I nearly dropped the coffee pot. "The whole summer? That's 3 months." "Well, the doctor says the fresh air would be good for my lungs," Dad explained. "And Eleanor's barely using the place these days. Her arthritis makes it hard for her to get up there." "When are you leaving?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I asked, my mind already calculating how this would affect our household routines. "Next week," Mom said casually. "I hope that's not a problem with you watching the house. You know how your father worries about leaving it empty for too long." Of course, they weren't asking if I wanted to come along. They were telling me I'd be house-sitting, again. What about Ryan? I asked, glancing toward his closed door where he was undoubtedly still sleeping. Oh, he already knows, Dad said, waving his hand. He said he's planning to stay with some friends this summer anyway. Something about a coding boot camp. So Ryan had known before me. And apparently he had summer plans that also didn't include me. At work that day, I went through my performance review in a daze. Michael offered his usual feedback. I was reliable and detail-oriented, but needed to show more leadership potential if I wanted to advance. I nodded in all the right places while my mind kept drifting to the Bali videos I'd watched the night before. During my lunch break, I met Olivia at our usual cafe. After listening to me recount my parents' announcement, she leaned forward. So, let me get this straight. Your entire family is abandoning you for the summer, and all they're concerned about is who's going to water the plants. When she put it that way, the reality hit me even harder. Pretty much. And what are you going to do with this unexpected freedom? Please tell me you have plans that don't involve reorganizing everyone's closets. I stirred my coffee absently. I don't know. I haven't had the house to myself in years. You know what normal people do when they suddenly have a big empty house and 3 months of relative freedom? Olivia asked, a mischievous glint in her eye. They throw parties, have flings, or rent the place out and go somewhere fabulous. Rent it out? I repeated. Sure. My sister makes a fortune putting her condo on Airbnb when she travels. Your house is in Lake Oswego, right? That's prime vacation rental territory. She pulled out her phone. Let's see what places like yours go for per night. The number that appeared on her screen made my eyes widen. That's a lot of money, I said slowly. Vacation rentals in Portland during summer? Absolutely. Especially in a nice neighborhood with multiple bedrooms. An idea began forming in my mind, so outrageous that I could barely acknowledge it even to myself. I could never, I started to say, but Olivia cut me off. Why couldn't you? Your parents are gone all summer. Ryan's staying with friends. You'd be doing the exact same thing they asked, watching the house, just remotely. From where? I asked, although a specific destination was already taking shape in my thoughts. Olivia grinned. Wherever you want, Sarah, for once in your life, wherever you want. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Olivia had said, about the Bali videos, about the fact that not a single person in my family had asked what I might want to do with my summer. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. Flights to Bali, accommodation costs, visa requirements. The more I looked, the more feasible the impossible idea became. If I rented out the rooms in our house, we had 4 bedrooms after all, I could not only fund a trip but potentially come back with savings. But the practical considerations were only part of the equation. The bigger question loomed, could I actually do this? Could I, Sarah Thompson, the reliable one, the responsible one, the one everyone counted on but no one really saw, simply, I'll leave? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. The next morning, I woke up early and did something I'd never done before. I called in sick to work when I wasn't actually ill. Then, I spent the day cleaning the house from top to bottom, taking photos of each room, and setting up an account on a vacation rental website. I wrote a detailed description highlighting the home's proximity to downtown Portland, the spacious backyard, and the quiet, upscale neighborhood. With a deep breath, I uploaded the listing, setting the availability to begin the day after my parents were scheduled to leave for Michigan. I priced it slightly below similar properties to attract immediate interest. That evening, Ryan announced his own news. So, Mom, I'm actually heading out this weekend. My buddy got me into this coding program in Seattle, and his parents said I could crash with them for the summer. This weekend? I repeated. But I thought you just moved back in. He shrugged. Yeah, but this is a huge opportunity. Plus, I'll save on rent for the summer. Of course. It always came down to what was convenient for him. Well, good luck with the program, I said, trying to hide my hurt. I hope it goes well. He barely looked up from his phone. Thanks. Oh, and can I borrow your car to move my stuff up there? Mine's making that weird noise again. And just like that, my resolve hardened. I went back to my room and checked my rental listing. 3 inquiries already. I responded to each one, setting up a booking for a family from Texas who wanted to explore the Pacific Northwest for 2 weeks, followed by a couple from Germany planning a month-long stay. Next, I looked at flights to Bali. The prices made me wince, but when I calculated the potential rental income, the trip became not just possible, but almost responsible. I could live in Bali for a fraction of what it cost to live in Portland, all while making money on the house. But I still hadn't addressed the biggest obstacle, my job. Could I really leave for the entire summer? I thought about my performance review, about the decade I'd spent being reliable without any real advancement, about Michael's constant demands and minimal recognition. An email notification popped up, another booking request for the house. The universe seemed to be pushing me toward this crazy decision. The next day at work, I requested a meeting with Michael. When I entered his office, he barely glanced up from his computer. Make it quick, Sarah. I've got the Henderson call in 10 minutes. I took a deep breath. I need to take a leave of absence for the summer. That got his attention. He looked up, surprised. A leave of absence? Why? Family reasons, I said vaguely. It wasn't entirely a lie. I was doing this for myself, and I was my own family too. That's not possible. Summer is our busiest period with the tourism accounts. I understand, but this is important. I've never asked for extended time off before, I pointed out. In fact, I have almost 12 weeks of unused vacation accumulated. But why now? Can't you do whatever this is in the fall, when things slow down? No, I said, surprising myself with my firmness. It needs to be now. He frowned. I'm sorry, Sarah, but I just can't approve this. It's too disruptive to our workflow. You're too essential. Essential. The word struck me as ironic. Essential for the smooth running of his professional life, yet not valuable enough to promote. Not valuable enough to accommodate when I finally asked for something I needed. I see, I said quietly. Then I'll need to give my notice. What? He looked genuinely shocked. I quit, I said, the words feeling foreign yet liberating on my tongue. I can stay for 2 weeks to help transition my responsibilities, but then I need to leave. You can't be serious. Where will you go? What will you do? I smiled, feeling suddenly lighter than I had in years. I'm going to live my life, Michael. For once, I'm going to live my own life. As I walked out of his office, my phone buzzed with a notification. The final booking had come through. The house was now fully rented for the entire summer, with a few days gap between guests that I'd intentionally scheduled for cleaning and maintenance by a service Olivia had recommended. It was really happening. I was going to Bali. When I told my parents I'd be traveling while they were at the lake house, I was vague about the details. I mentioned something about exploring some national parks, maybe visiting Megan in Seattle. They were so preoccupied with their own preparations that they hardly asked questions. Just make sure you forward the mail, my father reminded me. And don't forget to water your mother's hydrangeas. I didn't tell them about the rental bookings. I didn't tell them I'd be halfway across the world. I told myself I'd send an email once I was settled, once I had pictures to show them of where I was staying. Once the reality of what I was doing had fully sunk in for me. The day my parents left for Michigan and Ryan headed to Seattle, I stood in the empty house feeling a strange mixture of guilt and exhilaration. In 42 years, I'd never done anything this bold, this selfish, this necessary. The first family was scheduled to arrive in 2 days, giving me time for final preparations. I stored personal items in a locked closet, stocked the kitchen with basic supplies, and left detailed instructions about the house. Then I packed my own bag, just one suitcase and a backpack, lighter than I'd ever traveled before. Olivia drove me to the airport, practically bouncing with excitement on my behalf. "I can't believe you're actually doing this," she said as we pulled up to the departures terminal. "Sarah Thompson, International Woman of Mystery." "I'm still not sure I should," I admitted, my stomach churning with last-minute doubts. "What? If something happens to the house? What if my parents find out? What if you have the most amazing summer of your life and finally remember who you are beyond everyone else's needs?" Olivia cut in. "That's the what if you should be focusing on." She pulled me into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you. Now go, and send me pictures of gorgeous Balinese men, please. I need to live vicariously through someone." The journey was long. Portland to Los Angeles to Taipei, Taipei to Denpasar. By the time I landed in Bali, I'd been traveling for almost 30 hours and was disoriented from crossing the international date line. But as I stepped out of the air-conditioned airport into the humid Balinese air, something shifted inside me. I had arranged for a driver to take me to Ubud, the cultural heart of Bali, and the starting point for my adventure. As we drove through villages and past rice fields, the landscape was so different from anything I'd ever seen that it felt almost dreamlike. Palm trees swayed against a darkening sky, and the air was heavy with the scent of incense and tropical flowers. My accommodation was a small family-run guest house nestled among rice terraces just outside of Ubud. I'd chosen it based on reviews that mentioned the warmth of the hosts and the peaceful setting. When I arrived, the owner's daughter, a young woman named Kadak, welcomed me with a flower tucked behind my ear and a cold drink in my hand. "You look tired from your journey," she said kindly. "Rest tonight, and tomorrow Bali will show you her beauty." My room was simple but charming, with a small balcony overlooking the terraced fields. Mosquito netting draped over the bed, and a ceiling fan turned lazily overhead. It was nothing like my carefully decorated bedroom in Portland, yet somehow it felt more inviting. That first night, I slept more deeply than I had in years, lulled by the unfamiliar sounds of tropical insects and distant gamelan music. When I woke, for a moment I didn't remember where I was. Then it all came flooding back: the decision, the flight, the arrival. The fact that I, Sarah Thompson, was actually in Bali. I opened the balcony doors and stepped out into the morning light. The rice fields glowed emerald in the sun, and in the distance, I could see farmers in conical hats already at work. A breakfast tray waited outside my door: fresh fruit, Balinese coffee, and a small handwritten note from Kadak suggesting places I might like to visit. For the first few days, I barely ventured beyond Ubud. I wandered through the monkey forest, visited ancient temples, and browsed local markets. I ate meals at small warangs where I was often the only foreigner, pointing to dishes I couldn't pronounce and discovering flavors I'd never experienced. On my fourth day, while having coffee at a cafe overlooking the Kampuhan Ridge, I struck up a conversation with a woman sitting at the next table. Her name was Ayu, and she was a local tour guide taking a rare day off. "You are traveling alone?" she asked, her English clear but musical with the distinctive Balinese accent. "Yes," I admitted. "It's my first time traveling so far by myself." "Ah, brave," she said with a smile. "Most come to Bali with husband, friends, children. What brings you here alone?" I found myself telling Ayu my story: the house, the family, the job I'd left behind. She listened attentively, nodding at times, her dark eyes focused on mine. "You know," she said when I finished, "there is a temple near my village where people go when they need to release something heavy from their heart. Would you like to see it?" That afternoon, I found myself on the back of Ayu's motorbike, winding through back roads I would never have discovered on my own. We arrived at a small temple complex built into the side of a cliff, with a natural spring flowing through it. "This is Tirta Empul," Ayu explained. "People come here for purification. The water is holy." She showed me how to dress in the traditional sarong and sash, how to make an offering of flowers and incense, and how to enter the water respectfully. As I stood in the cool spring, letting the water flow over my head from carved stone spouts, I felt something shift inside me. A loosening, a letting go. Later, as we shared a meal of nasi campur at a roadside stall, Ayu asked me, "What will you do now that you are free?" Free. Was that what I was? The word felt both terrifying and exhilarating. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've never been free before." Ayu smiled. "Then Bali is the perfect place to learn." In the days that followed, I began to find a rhythm to my new life. Mornings often started with yoga at a studio overlooking the jungle. Afternoons were spent exploring, sometimes with Ayu as my guide, sometimes on my own. I learned to navigate the busy streets on a rented scooter, discovered hidden waterfalls and secret beaches, and slowly began to shed the layers of anxiety and obligation I'd carried for decades. I checked my email only once a day, relieved to find that the house rentals were going smoothly. The property management service reported no issues, and the reviews from guests were glowing. My parents occasionally sent brief updates from Michigan, and I responded with carefully curated half-truths about my whereabouts, always promising to call soon when the reception was better. One morning, about 3 weeks into my stay, I was having breakfast at my guest house when Kadak approached my table. "Miss Sarah," she said, "my father wonders if you would like to join our family tonight. It is a special ceremony at our temple, and then a feast." I was touched by the invitation. I'd be honored, but I wouldn't want to intrude on a family event. Kadak smiled. "In Bali, guests become family. My father says you have a good spirit. We would be happy if you come." That evening, dressed in a borrowed kabaya and sarong, I sat cross-legged on a mat in a family compound, watching as Kadak's father led prayers in ancient Sanskrit. Though I couldn't understand the words, there was something deeply moving about the ritual, the precision of movements, the wafting incense, the shared devotion. After the ceremony came the feast, dishes I'd never seen before, flavors both familiar and strange. As we ate, Kadak's family asked me questions about America, about my life, about my impressions of Bali. For once, I was the center of attention, not because of what I could do for others, but simply because of who I was. "You are different now," Kadak's grandmother said to me in halting English as the evening wound down. "When you come, your eyes sad. Now they shine." I realized she was right. Something fundamental had shifted in me during these weeks in Bali. I was sleeping better, laughing more, worrying less. My constant mental list of tasks and obligations had faded, replaced by an awareness of the present moment, the taste of sambal on my tongue, the feel of humid air on my skin, the sound of gamelan music drifting through the night. For the first time in my adult life, I was living fully in the present, not just enduring it while focusing on everyone else's future. As my first month in Bali drew to a close, I found myself increasingly torn. Part of me was beginning to think about my return to Portland, to reality. What would I do about work? How would I explain my trip to my family? Could I possibly maintain this newfound sense of self once I was back in the environment that had shaped me into the perpetual caretaker? But another part of me was reluctant to even think about leaving. I had barely scratched the surface of what Bali had to offer, and my savings, combined with the rental income from the house, meant I could potentially stay longer than I'd originally planned. One evening, as I was pondering these questions on the balcony of my guest house, my phone pinged with an email notification. It was from the property management company. There had been a small issue with the plumbing at the house, but they'd handled it. The German couple currently staying there hadn't even been inconvenienced. As I was reading the email, a call came through. It was Ryan. My heart raced. Had something happened? Was he okay? "Ryan, is everything all right?" I answered, my voice tight with worry. "Mom, where are you?" He sounded annoyed rather than concerned. "I've been trying to reach you for days." "I'm traveling, remember? I told you I'd be hard to reach sometimes." "Yeah, but I need my birth certificate for this program I'm applying to." I went by the house and there were strangers there. They said they rented the place for the summer. My stomach dropped. "You went to the house? Why didn't you call first?" "I did. You didn't answer." He paused. "Mom, what's going on? Did you rent out Grandpa and Grandma's house?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, I did. And it's not just their house, Ryan. I live there too, remember?" "But where are you? You said you were visiting some parks or something." I closed my eyes, feeling a mixture of guilt and defiance. "I'm in Bali." "Bali? Like the island? In Indonesia?" His voice rose in disbelief. "Mom, what the hell?" "Language," I said automatically. "You're on the other side of the world, and you're worried about my language? Does Grandpa know you rented out his house? Does Megan know where you are?" "No," I admitted. "I was going to tell everyone once I was settled. And then I trailed off, realizing I'd been putting off that conversation, enjoying the freedom of being unavailable, unreachable. "This is so weird," Ryan muttered. "My mom's having a midlife crisis in Bali." The accusation stung. "It's not a crisis. Ryan, it's a choice. For once, I made a choice that was just for me." There was a long silence on the line. "I still need my birth certificate," he finally said. I resisted the urge to apologize, to promise I'd fix everything immediately. "It's in the filing cabinet in my bedroom. I can email the property manager and ask them to let you in to get it." "Fine, whatever." His tone was sullen. "Just call Megan, okay? She's freaking out because you haven't been answering her emails about some family reunion thing." After we hung up, I sat for a long time watching the stars come out over the rice fields. The conversation with Ryan had left me feeling unsettled. Was I being selfish, irresponsible? Or was I finally taking care of myself after decades of putting everyone else first? The next morning, steeling myself, I called Megan. Unlike Ryan, she was immediately worried rather than annoyed. "Mom, are you okay? I've been so worried." "I'm fine, Megan. Better than fine, actually. I'm in Bali." There was a pause. "Did you say Bali?" I explained about the house, the rental income, my decision to travel. Unlike Ryan, Megan listened without interrupting. "Wow, Mom," she said when I finished. "I had no idea you were so unhappy." "I wasn't unhappy exactly," I tried to explain. "I was just invisible, even to myself." Another pause. "I think I get it. It's like when I first moved to Seattle and realized I could reinvent myself. Nobody knew me as Robert's responsible daughter or Ryan's sensible sister. I was just Megan." "Yes," I said, relieved that she understood. "Exactly like that." "So what happens when you come back?" she asked. "Are you going to tell Grandpa and Grandma about the house?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. "I don't know. I should probably tell them before they come home, but you're afraid they'll be mad," Megan finished for me. "Or worse, disappointed." "Yes," I admitted. "I've never really defied them before. Not like this." "Mom," Megan said, her voice gentler than I could remember it being in years. "You're allowed to live your own life, even if they don't understand at first." After talking with Megan, I felt both lighter and more resolved. The next day, I wrote a long email to my parents, explaining my decision to travel to Bali and my arrangement with the house. I attached photos of where I was staying, of the temples I'd visited, of me smiling on a beach with Ayu. I ended by promising to be back before they returned from Michigan, to have the house clean and ready for them. Their response came 2 days later, a brief, somewhat confused email from my mother, asking if I was eating enough and reminding me to use sunscreen. No mention of the rental situation. No questions about why I'd gone so far away or when, exactly, I'd be back. It was almost as if they couldn't quite process that I'd done something so unexpected, so outside the bounds of who they thought I was. As my 6th week in Bali began, I received an unexpected message from Olivia. She'd been offered a last-minute spot on a guided trek through the rice terraces of northern Bali and was wondering if she could crash with me for a few days before and after the trek. Of course, I replied immediately, thrilled at the prospect of sharing this place I'd come to love with someone who knew the before version of me. Olivia arrived in a whirlwind of enthusiasm, hugging me tightly at the airport. "Look at you!" she exclaimed, holding me at arm's length. "You're absolutely glowing. And is that a tan? On Sarah Thompson, SPF 50 devotee?" I laughed, suddenly, self-conscious about my sun-kissed skin and the loose, colorful clothes I'd adopted in place of my usual neutral work attire. "It's the Bali effect," I explained as we drove back to Ubud. "It's impossible to stay pale and uptight here." For the next few days, I played tour guide, showing Olivia my favorite spots. The hidden waterfall Ayu had shown me, the best cafe for sunset views, the market stall with the most delicious satay. We talked for hours over cold bintang beers, and I found myself sharing emotions and thoughts I'd rarely articulated even to myself. "You know what's been the most surprising?" I told her one evening as we sat on the balcony of my guest house. "How quickly I've adapted to this totally different life. It's like I'm finally living at my natural rhythm instead of constantly adjusting myself to everyone else's." Olivia studied me thoughtfully. "You seem so much more present, like you're fully inhabiting your life instead of just managing it." "That's exactly it," I said, surprised by her perception. "I never realized how much of my energy went into anticipating other people's needs, smoothing out their problems before they even happened." "So, what's next?" she asked. "Are you coming home when your parents get back?" I sighed. "I have to, at least temporarily. The house rental ends a week before they return, and I need to get everything back in order." "And then what?" Olivia pressed, leaning forward with curiosity in her eyes. "You can't just go back to being everyone's personal assistant, Sarah. Not after all this." The question hung in the humid evening air as I swirled the last of my mango juice in its glass. What was next? The thought of returning to Portland filled me with a complicated mixture of dread and responsibility. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to stay longer, maybe even find work here. But the practical side of me knows I need to figure out a more sustainable plan. I can't live off rental income forever." Olivia nodded thoughtfully. "You know, the old Sarah would have already had a 10-point plan with contingencies mapped out." I laughed. The old Sarah would never have left Portland in the first place. After Olivia departed for her trek, I found myself thinking more seriously about my future. I'd been in Bali for nearly 2 months now, and while my savings combined with the rental income had kept me comfortable, I knew decisions needed to be made. One morning, as I was enjoying my usual breakfast on the guest house terrace, Kadek approached, with a strange expression on her face. "Miss Sarah, there is someone asking for you at reception." Confused, no one except Olivia knew where I was staying. I followed her to the front of the property. There, looking tired and completely out of place in pressed khaki pants and a button-down shirt, stood Ryan. "Ryan?" I gasped, frozen in shock. "What are you doing here?" He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting around at the lush tropical plants surrounding the modest reception area. "Surprise," he said weakly. "Can we talk somewhere?" Still stunned, I led him to a small seating area near the koi pond. As we sat, I noticed how out of his element he looked, sweating in his inappropriate clothing, clearly jet-lagged, his usual confidence replaced by uncertainty. "How did you find me?" I finally asked. "Megan," he admitted. "She had the name of your guest house from your emails." "But why are you here? Is something wrong? Did something happen to Grandpa or Grandma?" He shook his head. "Everyone's fine. He trailed off, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that reminded me painfully of his childhood. "After our call, I kept thinking about what you said, about making a choice just for yourself." I waited, sensing there was more. Then, Megan called and read me the riot act. She said I've been treating you like a vending machine my whole life, putting in the minimum and expecting maximum output. And she was right. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I've never once asked what you wanted, Mom. Not once in my entire life." The admission hung between us, simple yet profound. I felt a lump form in my throat. "So I'm here to ask now," Ryan continued. "What do you want, Mom? Not what do we need from you or what should you do for the family. What do you want?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. What did I want? After almost 2 months of self-discovery, the answer wasn't as clear as it should have been. I began, then paused, collecting my thoughts. I want to matter to myself as much as I matter to everyone else. I want to wake up in the morning and choose my own priorities sometimes. I want to discover what I enjoy when I'm not busy taking care of everyone else's needs. Ryan nodded slowly. "That seems fair," he said, his voice small. "More than fair." I studied my son, seeing him perhaps more clearly than I had in years. Despite his sometimes selfish behavior, Ryan wasn't a bad person. He'd simply grown up, in the environment I'd helped create, one where Mom always took care of everything, where Mom's needs were always last on the list. "Would you like to see some of Bali while you're here?" I offered, feeling the tension between us begin to ease. "How long can you stay?" Ryan's face relaxed into a tentative smile. "I've got a week. The coding boot camp's on break." That week with Ryan became one of the most unexpected gifts of my entire journey. I showed him my favorite places, introduced him to Ayu and Kadek, and watched with amusement as he gamely tried foods he'd never dreamed of eating. In turn, he helped me set up an Instagram account to document my travels and taught me how to use features on my phone I hadn't known existed. On his third day, as we hiked to a waterfall Ayu had recommended, Ryan turned to me with a serious expression. "You know, I never really saw you as a person separate from being my mom," he admitted. "I mean, I knew you had a job and stuff, but I just thought your main thing in life was, well, us." I smiled, remembering how I'd felt the same way about my own mother until well into adulthood. "For a long time it was," I acknowledged. "But now you and Megan are grown. It's time for me to figure out who I am beyond being your mother." "You're good at it," Ryan said suddenly. "Being on your own, I mean. You seem really at home here." The observation touched me deeply. "Thank you for noticing that. I feel more myself here than I have in a very long time." On Ryan's last evening, we sat at a beachside cafe in Seminyak, watching the spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "So what's the plan, Mom? Are you coming back to Portland soon?" I took a sip of my coconut water before answering. "I need to go back before your grandparents return. Get the house in order, figure out some logistics." "But you're not staying, are you?" His question was perceptive, free of judgment. "I don't think so," I said slowly, surprising myself with the certainty I felt. At least, not in the same way as before. Ryan nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Megan and I have been talking," he said. "We think maybe it's time Grandpa and Grandma looked into one of those nice retirement communities they've been thinking about. The one where all their friends are moving. I blinked in surprise. My parents had indeed been considering such a move for years, but had always postponed it, citing the expense and the hassle of downsizing. "I think you might be right," I said carefully, "but they're very attached to the house." "Yeah, but they're also very attached to having you as their personal caretaker," Ryan pointed out. "And maybe that arrangement doesn't work for everyone anymore." As I said goodbye to Ryan at the airport the next morning, I felt a shift in our relationship, subtle but significant. He hugged me tightly, then pulled back to look me in the eye. "I'm sorry it took you flying to the other side of the world for me to see you, Mom. Really see you." Tears pricked at my eyes. "Better late than never," I managed with a smile. After he was gone, I wandered along the beach, my mind whirling with thoughts about the future. My conversation with Ryan had crystallized something I'd been feeling. For weeks, I couldn't go back to my old life. Not entirely, not in the same way. But what would the alternative look like? That evening, I received an unexpected message from Ayu. She was organizing a small tour group for the following week, mostly women traveling alone or with friends. And her usual assistant had fallen ill. Would I be interested in helping out? She'd pay me, of course. The offer caught me by surprise. Me, a tour guide in Bali? The idea seemed absurd at first, but then I thought about how much I'd learned about the island in my time here, how comfortable I'd become navigating its customs and terrain. And I'd always been good at organizing, at anticipating needs, at making people feel comfortable. I agreed to meet Ayu the next day to discuss the details. Over coffee at our usual cafe, she outlined what the job would entail, handling logistics, helping communicate with local vendors, making sure everyone was comfortable and informed. "You think I can do this?" I asked, uncertain. "I've never done anything like it before." Ayu's smile was warm. "Sarah, you have been doing this your whole life, just for different people. And you know Bali now. You see it with fresh eyes, but also with respect. This is valuable." The more we talked, the more excited I became about the possibility. The tour was only 5 days, but if it went well, Ayu mentioned there might be opportunities for more work. Her small company was growing, and she needed reliable help. "Think about it," she said as we parted. "No need to decide now." But I already knew my answer. This unexpected opportunity felt right in a way I couldn't quite explain. A perfect bridge between my natural talents and my new life. I messaged Ayu that evening to accept the offer. The tour group consisted of 8 women, 4 Australians, 2 Canadians, and 2 Americans, ranging in age from mid-30s to early 60s. As Ayu introduced me as her assistant, I felt a momentary panic. What if they asked about my qualifications? What if they could tell I was just a middle-aged woman having an adventure, not a real tour professional? But my fears proved unfounded. The women were warm and curious, more interested in experiencing Bali than in credentials. And to my surprise, I found I had plenty to offer. Not just practical information I'd absorbed over the past months, but also personal stories about my own journey that seemed to resonate with many of them. "I can't believe you just left everything behind and came here," one of the Canadian women, Teresa, said admiringly, as we hiked through the Tegalalang rice terraces. "I've been dreaming of doing something like that for years." It wasn't quite as dramatic as it sounds, I laughed, helping her navigate a particularly steep section. I had the perfect opportunity with my family away for the summer. And honestly, I didn't plan to stay this long. "But you did," she pointed out. "That takes courage." I hadn't thought of it as courage before. Desperation, perhaps. Self-preservation. But as I guided these women through experiences that would have terrified me just months earlier, I began to recognize the truth in Teresa's words. It had taken courage to step away from a lifetime of patterns, to disappoint people's expectations, to face the unknown. The tour was a success by any measure. The women left glowing reviews for Ayu's company, specifically mentioning how helpful, and insightful I'd been. Ayu was delighted and immediately offered me a position with her growing business. "Not full-time yet," she cautioned. "But we have 3 more tours next month. And I need someone to help build our website, manage bookings. You said you did this kind of work before, yes?" The irony wasn't lost on me. Using my administrative skills, the very ones that had kept me stuck in my old life, to build something new. But this felt different. This was working with Ayu, not for her. This was helping create something we both believed in, not just executing someone else's vision. "I need to go back to Portland for a while," I told her, "to sort things out with my family, my house, but I could come back." "Bali will wait for you," Ayu said simply. "The gods have brought you here for a reason, I think." As my planned departure date approached, I found myself growing increasingly anxious about returning to Portland. I'd been away for nearly 3 months. The final vacation renters would be leaving the house in a few days, and I'd arranged for a thorough cleaning service before my return. My parents were due back from Michigan in 2 weeks. Everything was proceeding according to plan, and yet, I felt unsettled. One evening, sitting on the small balcony outside my room, I forced myself to confront what was bothering me. It wasn't the practical aspects of returning. Those were all manageable. It was the fear of being pulled back into old patterns, old expectations, the fear of losing myself again in the needs of others. My phone buzzed with a message from Megan. "How's the packing going? Still on track for Thursday?" I typed back, "All on schedule. How are things there?" Her response came quickly. "Interesting, actually. Ryan and I had a long talk with Grandpa and Grandma. About the retirement community. About you." My heart skipped a beat. I'd asked Ryan not to mention the house rental situation to my parents until I could speak with them myself. "What about me?" I typed, tension building in my shoulders. "Nothing bad," Megan assured me. "Just that you deserve your own life, that we all took advantage of your generosity for too long." Grandma actually got a little teary. Said she never realized how much they'd been leaning on you. I stared at the message, hardly daring to believe it. "Ryan told them about coming. To see you in Bali," Megan continued. "Showed them pictures. They were shocked, but I think also a little impressed. Grandpa kept saying, 'I never thought Sarah had it in her.'" I laughed out loud at that, relief washing over me. Maybe, just maybe, this return wouldn't be as difficult as I feared. "Anyway," Megan's message concluded, "they're looking at a unit at Lakeside Gardens next week, the one they've had their eye on for ages. I think they're finally ready." I set down my phone, my heart full. The sun was setting over the rice fields, painting everything in a golden glow that seemed to embody the warmth I was feeling. For the first time since booking my return flight, I felt a sense of calm about the journey ahead. The following day, I met Ayu for lunch to discuss final details of our arrangement. She would pay me a retainer to help with the company's online presence remotely, and I would return to Bali for the tours scheduled later in the summer. "So you will have 1 foot in America, 1 foot in Bali," she said with a smile. "Like a bridge between worlds." The image resonated with me. "A bridge? Not a doormat," I said, more to myself than to Ayu. She tilted her head questioningly. "Doormat?" "Something people walk all over," I explained. "Something that exists only to serve others." Ayu nodded in understanding. "Ah, yes. In Bali, we believe in harmony, with nature, with spirits, with each other. But harmony does not mean you disappear. It means finding your right place in the whole. My right place in the whole." The phrase stayed with me as I packed my bags, said goodbye to Kadak and her family, took one last walk along the ridge overlooking Ubud. I was not returning to Portland as the same person who had left. I was bringing Bali with me, not just souvenirs and photographs, but a newfound sense of my place in the world. The flight home was long, and by the time I landed in Portland, I felt disoriented by the change in time zones, climate, and energy. The city seemed louder, faster, and more aggressive than I remembered. Yet as the taxi pulled into the familiar streets of Lake Oswego, a surprising sense of homecoming washed over me. The house looked exactly as I remembered, though the management company had ensured it was immaculately clean. I dropped my bags in the entryway and walked slowly from room to room, reacquainting myself with the space. It was strange to see it through new eyes, to notice how many pieces of furniture, art, and decor had been chosen to please others rather than myself. In my bedroom, I unpacked the few treasures I'd brought back from Bali: a small wooden Ganesha statue, a hand-painted silk scarf, a bracelet of volcanic stone beads given to me by Kadek's grandmother. I arranged them carefully on my dresser, tangible reminders of the woman I'd become. The next morning, jet lag woke me before dawn. I made coffee and sat on the back porch, watching the sky lighten over the suburban landscape. It was beautiful in its own way. Not the dramatic, lush beauty of Bali, but the understated, manicured beauty of American affluence. I could appreciate it now without feeling trapped by it. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was my mother. "Sarah, are you home? Ryan told us your flight was yesterday." "Yes, Mom. I got in last night." I braced myself for questions, recriminations, disappointment. "How was it?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Your trip?" I took a deep breath. "It was wonderful. Life-changing, actually. I'd love to tell you all about it when you get back." "We'd like that," she said, and I thought I detected a note of genuine curiosity in her voice. "Your father?" Well, we've been doing some thinking while we've been here at Eleanor's." "Oh?" I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Yes, about the future. About the house." She paused. "Sarah, we've decided to put in an application at Lakeside Gardens. The Henderson unit is available, the corner one with the extra sunroom." "That's wonderful, Mom," I said, genuinely pleased. "You've been talking about that place for years." "We have," she acknowledged, "but we were always worried about the money and about leaving you alone in the house." I almost laughed at the irony. They had been worried about leaving me alone in the house, while I had been desperate for exactly that. "I think it's the right decision," I told her. "And you don't need to worry about me. I've been thinking about making some changes too." There was a pause. Then my mother asked, "Does this have something to do with why you went all the way to Indonesia by yourself?" The directness of the question surprised me. "Yes," I admitted. "I needed to figure some things out, about what I want my life to look like going forward." Another pause. "And did you figure things out?" I smiled, watching a hummingbird dart among the flowers in the garden. "I'm getting there. I've got a job opportunity that would have me traveling back to Bali periodically. And I'm thinking about downsizing myself, maybe getting an apartment closer to downtown." "I see," my mother said slowly. "That sounds very independent." "It is," I agreed. "But it's time, don't you think? For all of us to make choices that truly work for us, not just what we think others expect." To my surprise, my mother let out a small, shaky laugh. "Your father said something similar just the other day. He said we've been living our lives on autopilot for too long." The conversation left me feeling strangely buoyant. It seemed that my journey had created ripples of change that extended beyond just my own life. My parents making a long-delayed decision, Ryan and Megan reassessing their assumptions, even Olivia talking about taking a sabbatical from her own job. Over the next few days, I began the process of reimagining my life in Portland. I contacted a realtor to discuss the possibility of selling the house once my parents had moved. We'd split the proceeds, of course, but it would give me enough to buy a small place of my own. I reached out to a few contacts in the marketing world, exploring possibilities for part-time or freelance work to supplement my income from IU's tour company. I also began sorting through my possessions, a process that proved both challenging and liberating. How much did I really need? What items truly brought me joy? And which ones had I kept out of obligation or habit? The woman who had left for Bali with just one suitcase now looked at her closets with a critical eye, assessing what was essential and what was merely accumulated. A week after my return, I received an email from Kadek with photos attached. The sunset from my balcony, the new flowers blooming in the rice fields, her grandmother weaving a ceremonial basket. "Bali misses you," she wrote. "We are keeping your room ready for when you return." The message brought tears to my eyes. I had found not just a new place in Bali, but a new family of sorts. People who had welcomed me without expectation, who had seen me simply as Sarah, not as someone defined by what I could do for others. As I prepared for my parents' return from Michigan, I felt a surprising sense of calm. The conversation we needed to have about the house rental would not be easy, but I was no longer afraid of their disappointment or anger. Whatever came next, I had found something in Bali that couldn't be taken away, a confidence in my own worth that existed independently of others' approval. The day before my parents were due to arrive, I took myself out to dinner at a small Thai restaurant downtown, a small celebration of sorts. As I savored flavors that reminded me of my Balinese adventures, I scrolled through the photos on my phone, amazed at the transformation documented there. Images of temples and beaches? Yes, but also pictures of me looking relaxed, joyful, present in a way I hadn't been for decades. My phone pinged with a message from IU. "Good news. The tour for next month is fully booked. When can you return?" I smiled, already mentally calculating dates, flights, arrangements. The answer came easily, without the anxiety that had characterized every decision I'd made for so long. "I'll be there," I typed back. "Bali isn't finished with me yet." As I walked back to my car under a rare, clear Portland sky, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. The house I was returning to wasn't just a place I maintained for others anymore. It was a way station on a journey that had only just begun. The woman who had been invisible even to herself had finally stepped into the light, ready to be seen. The morning my parents were due to return, I woke before sunrise. Sleep had been elusive, my mind cycling through all the possible ways our reunion might unfold. Would they be angry about the house rentals? Disappointed in my impulsive trip? Or perhaps, as their recent phone call suggested, more understanding than I'd given them credit for. I made coffee and carried it out to the back porch, watching as the neighborhood gradually came to life. Sprinklers turning on, newspapers being delivered, early joggers making their rounds. This familiar rhythm that had once felt suffocating now seemed almost charming in its predictability. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Good luck today. Call me after. Love you." Her support warmed me. Both my children had surprised me with their capacity for growth these past months. Perhaps we had all been trapped in roles that no longer served us. At precisely 10 o'clock, a taxi pulled into the driveway. I took a deep breath and stepped outside to greet my parents. "Sarah?" my mother called, waving as if we were meeting. At an airport after a brief separation. "The house looks lovely." My father was more restrained, nodding as he paid the driver. "Good to be home," he muttered, though I noticed his eyes scanning the property as if checking for damage. Once inside, my mother launched into stories about Michigan, the weather, Eleanor's health problems, the grandchildren of mutual friends they'd encountered. My father disappeared upstairs with their luggage, and I found myself relaxing slightly. Perhaps this wouldn't be as difficult as I'd feared. "Mom, Dad," I said during a natural lull in the conversation. "There's something I need to talk to you about." My mother's expression immediately shifted to concern. "Is everything all right? Are you ill?" I'm fine, I assured her. Better than fine, actually. But there's something I should tell you about what happened while you were away. My father had returned and was now settling into his favorite armchair. If it's about that scratch on the garage door, I noticed it already. Not a big deal. It's not about a scratch, I said, smiling despite my nervousness. It's about what I did this summer. Carefully, I explained about renting out the house, about my trip to Bali, about Ayu and the tour company. I showed them photos on my phone, narrating my experiences as my parents exchanged increasingly bewildered glances. When I finished, there was a long silence. My father cleared his throat. You rented our house to strangers, without asking? His tone was incredulous rather than angry. Yes, I admitted. I should have discussed it with you first, and I'm sorry for that. But the rental income paid for my trip, and the property management company took excellent care of everything. But what if something had happened? My mother protested. What if there had been a fire or a break-in? There's insurance, I pointed out gently. And the house is in my name too, Mom. Has been since you added me to the deed 5 years ago. Another silence fell, heavier this time. My father leaned forward in his chair. Sarah, I don't understand. Why would you do this? If you wanted a vacation, you could have just said so. The question struck me as so fundamentally missing, the point that I almost laughed. It wasn't just about a vacation, Dad. It was about doing something for myself for once. About seeing who I could be when I wasn't defined by what I do for everyone else. My mother's face softened slightly. We never meant to take advantage, Sarah. I know, I said, and I meant it. But that's how patterns develop, isn't it? No one intends them, they just happen. And before you know it, years have passed. My father was still frowning, struggling to process this unfamiliar version of his dependable daughter. And this job in Bali? Is that still happening? I nodded. I'll be going back next month for a tour, and possibly again in the fall. Ayu's business is growing and I'm good at the work. But what about your job here? My mother asked. And the house? And everything? It was the everything that hung in the air between us. All the unspoken expectations, the roles we'd all comfortably occupied for decades. Things are changing, I said gently. You're looking at lakeside gardens. Ryan and Megan have their own lives. Maybe it's time I figured out what I want mine to look like too. My father stood abruptly. I need to check the mail, he muttered, heading for the door. My mother watched him go with a worried expression. He'll come around, she said, though I wasn't sure if she was reassuring me or herself. It's just a shock, that's all. We always thought that I'd stay exactly as I was, I finished for her. The reliable one. The one who never caused problems. To my surprise, tears welled in my mother's eyes. You were always so self-sufficient, even as a little girl. You never seemed to need anything from us, not like Ryan. He was always demanding attention, and Megan with her endless activities and dramas. I stared at her, realizing with a jolt that my parents' perception of me had been as limited as my children's. They hadn't seen me as a doormat. They'd seen me as someone so competent that she didn't need support or attention. I did need things, I said quietly. I still do. I'm just not very good at asking for them. My mother reached across the table and took my hand, a rare gesture from a woman who had never been demonstrative. Then perhaps that's something we can all work on. The conversation with my parents wasn't a single event, but the beginning of a new dialogue that unfolded over the coming weeks. There were difficult moments, my father's lingering disapproval, my mother's anxiety about what the neighbors would think, but also surprising instances of connection and understanding. One evening, as I helped my father sort through items to donate before their move to Lakeside Gardens, he paused while holding an old photo album. I never told you this, he said, his voice gruff with uncharacteristic emotion. "But I almost left once, when you kids were small." I nearly dropped the box I was carrying. "Left? You and Mom?" He nodded, not meeting my eyes. "Got as far as buying a plane ticket to Colorado. Had this idea I'd work as a fishing guide in the mountains." I tried to reconcile this revelation with my image of my steady, predictable father. "What happened?" "Reality happened," he said with a short laugh. "Responsibilities, mortgage payments. Your mother's health issues that year." He finally looked at me, his eyes clearer than I'd seen them in years. "I'm not saying I regret staying, but I understand something about needing to break free." His words stayed with me as I continued my own preparations for the future. The realtor had found potential buyers for the house, contingent on my parents' move to Lakeside Gardens. I'd secured a small freelance contract with a local marketing firm that would provide steady income between my trips to Bali. Piece by piece, a new life was taking shape. Olivia invited me to dinner to hear about my parents' return and my plans going forward. We met at a new fusion restaurant downtown, the kind of place I'd never have thought to try before my Balinese adventures. "So you're really doing this," she said, raising her glass in a toast. "Reinventing yourself at 42. I'm impressed." "It doesn't feel like reinvention exactly," I mused. "More like discovery. Finding the person who was always there beneath all the roles and responsibilities." "Well, discovery girl, I have news of my own," Olivia announced with a grin. "That trek I did in Bali, it changed something for me too. I've applied for a 6-month sabbatical from work. I'm going to volunteer with a literacy program in Vietnam." I nearly spilled my drink in surprise. "Olivia, that's amazing. When do you leave?" "January," she said, her face alight with excitement. And I was thinking, maybe you could help me prepare? Share some of your wisdom about traveling solo in Southeast Asia? The idea that I, Sarah Thompson, who had never ventured beyond the West Coast until 3 months ago, might have wisdom to share about international travel seemed ludicrous. Yet here was Olivia, successful, confident Olivia, looking at me with genuine respect and interest. I'd be honored, I told her, feeling a rush of affection for this friend who had been the first to encourage my own journey. The weeks before, my return to Bali were filled with practical preparations. I found a small furnished apartment to rent month to month after the house sale. I helped my parents sort through decades of accumulated possessions, deciding what would fit in their new, smaller space at Lakeside Gardens. I set up systems to manage my freelance work remotely. But amid all this activity, I also made time for something new: relationships based on reciprocity rather than caretaking. I had lunch with Megan when she visited from Seattle, listening, more than advising as she talked about her career challenges. I went to a baseball game with Ryan, where we talked about his coding program and his new girlfriend with an ease that had been missing from our interactions for years. And I began saying no, politely but firmly, to requests that didn't align with my priorities. No, I couldn't chair the neighborhood association meeting. No, I couldn't take over my mother's volunteer shift at the church thrift store. No, I couldn't reschedule my trip to Bali because it conflicted with a distant cousin's anniversary party. Each refusal was difficult, flying in the face of decades of conditioning. But each one also strengthened a muscle I'd never properly developed: the ability to honor my own needs and boundaries. The day before my flight back to Bali, Ryan and Megan came over to the house for a farewell dinner. To my surprise, they had taken charge of the arrangements, ordering food from my favorite Thai restaurant and bringing a cake decorated with a surprisingly accurate fondant replica of a Balinese temple. "We figured you've cooked enough meals for us over the years," Megan explained with a smile. "It's our turn to take care of you for once." As we ate, they presented me with a gift, a beautiful leather-bound travel journal with my initials embossed on the cover. Inside, on the first page, They had both written notes of encouragement and love. "For all the adventures to come," Ryan's message read. "Thanks for showing us it's never too late to change the story." I hugged them both, filled with gratitude for how our relationships had evolved. We weren't perfect. There were still moments of old patterns reasserting themselves, of expectations not fully shed. But we were moving forward with greater awareness and intention. After they left, I finished packing, carefully selecting items that had proven useful during my first stay in Bali, while leaving behind anything extraneous. The woman who had once packed for every possible contingency now valued lightness and flexibility over preparation and control. Early the next morning, as the taxi arrived to take me to the airport, I took one last look at the house that had been the center of my life for so long. Soon it would belong to a new family, with their own patterns and dynamics. I said a silent goodbye, not to the structure itself, but to the version of myself who had lived within its walls, always accommodating, always available, always putting herself last. The journey back to Bali felt different this time. Not an escape, but a purposeful return. I was no longer running away from an unsatisfying life, but moving toward one I was actively creating. The anxieties that had plagued my first trip. What if something goes wrong? What will everyone think? Who am I to do this? Had been replaced by a quiet confidence. When I emerged from the airport in Denpasar, Ayu was waiting, her familiar smile a welcome sight after the long journey. "Welcome back," she said, embracing me. "How was your time with family?" "Challenging," I admitted as we made our way to her car. "But good. Necessary." She nodded in understanding. "Sometimes we must go away to come back stronger. This is the way of pilgrimages." I hadn't thought of my journey in those terms before, a pilgrimage, but the word resonated. A sacred journey undertaken with purpose, leading to transformation. The drive to Ubud was filled with Ayu's updates about the tour company, the upcoming groups, and changes in the village. I found myself relaxing into the rhythm of her speech, the melodic rise and fall of her accent, the occasional Balinese phrases she used when English wouldn't suffice. When we reached the guest house, Kadak was waiting at the entrance, beaming with pleasure. "Miss Sarah, we kept your room just as you like it." Indeed, as I settled into the familiar space, the balcony overlooking the rice fields, the simple bed with its canopy of mosquito netting, the small desk where I'd written in my journal each evening, I felt a profound sense of homecoming. Not the homecoming I'd experienced returning to Portland, with its mixture of familiarity and constraint, but a homecoming to a place where I could be fully myself. The tour group arrived 2 days later, 12 women from various countries, most traveling solo, ranging in age from late 20s to early 70s. As Ayu made introductions, I found myself studying their faces, wondering what had brought each of them to this moment, this place. There was Diane, a recently divorced physician from Toronto who had never traveled alone before. Jennifer, a college professor using her sabbatical to research Balinese textile traditions. May, a young tech worker from Singapore seeking respite from burnout. Each had her own story, her own reason for being here. As we led them through the carefully crafted itinerary, a morning yoga session, a visit to a local craft village, lunch at a family compound where they would learn to make offerings, I found myself sharing not just practical information, but also perspectives gained from my own experiences as a visitor who had become something more. Bali has a way of reflecting back what you need to see, I told them as we sat in a circle after dinner that first evening. Sometimes it's beauty, sometimes challenge, sometimes connection. The key is to stay open to whatever appears. To my surprise, the women looked at me with the same attentiveness they showed Ayu, the real guide. My words carried weight, not because of any special expertise, but because of the authenticity of my experience. I wasn't pretending to be someone. I wasn't. I was simply sharing what I had learned through my own transformation. As the tour progressed, I found myself growing more comfortable in this new role. I helped navigate minor crises, lost passports, stomach upsets, miscommunications with local vendors, with the same skills I'd used throughout my life. But now deployed in service of work I found meaningful, and relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. One evening, as the group enjoyed a traditional dance performance, Ayu pulled me aside. "You are good at this," she said, her expression thoughtful. "The women trust you. You understand how to bridge cultures." "Oh," I smiled, accepting the compliment. "I've had practice being the person everyone relies on." "Yes, but now it is different. Yes, now you choose this role." Her perception startled me. She was right. The actions might look similar from the outside, but the internal experience was entirely transformed. When I helped one of the tour participants navigate a difficult conversation with a local artisan, I wasn't doing it out of a need to be needed or a fear of disappointing others. I was doing it because it aligned with my values and brought me genuine satisfaction. After the tour ended, Ayu and I sat down to evaluate how it had gone and plan for the next one. To my surprise, she slid a contract across the table. "I want to make our arrangement more formal," she explained. "You would be partner, not just assistant. We would share responsibilities, decisions, and profits." I stared at the document, momentarily speechless. "Ayu, I'm honored, but are you sure? I've only been doing this for a short time." She smiled. "You bring something valuable. Perspective, organization, understanding of Western travelers. I bring local knowledge, connections, experience. Together, we make something better than either alone." The offer represented everything I had been working toward: meaningful work, genuine partnership, a life divided between two places I now loved. Yet old habits of self-doubt tried to assert themselves. "I don't know," I hedged. "I should probably think about it." Ayu nodded, unperturbed. "Of course, take time to consider." "But Sarah," she added, meeting my eyes directly, "sometimes thinking too much is just another way of saying no to yourself." Her words struck home. How many opportunities had I missed in my life because I overthought them? How many times had I talked myself out of what I truly wanted because it seemed impractical, selfish, or simply too far outside my comfort zone? "You're right," I admitted. "And the truth is, I don't need to think about it. This is exactly what I want." We signed the contract then and there, marking the moment with strong Balinese coffee and mutual plans for the future of our business. Walking back to my guest house afterward, I felt a deep sense of rightness settle over me, the feeling of having made a decision that honored my true self. That evening, I wrote long emails to Ryan, Megan, and my parents, sharing my news and my plans for the coming months. I would return to Portland in time to help my parents complete their move to Lakeside Gardens, finalize the sale of the house, and set up my new apartment. Then I would divide my time: 3 months in Bali during high season, working directly with tour groups; 3 months in Portland during the rainy season, handling marketing and bookings remotely; and the rest of the year flexible, depending on business needs and personal wishes. As I hit send on the last email, I realized how different this communication felt from those I'd sent during my first weeks in Bali. Gone was the defensiveness, the need to justify my choices, the underlying anxiety about others' reactions. In its place was a quiet confidence in the path I had chosen, not because it was perfect or without challenges, but because it was authentically mine. The following day, a notification appeared on my phone. The final paperwork for my parents' move to Lakeside Gardens had been processed. They would be moving in 3 weeks, slightly ahead of schedule. The house sale was proceeding smoothly, with closing set for the end of the month. All the practical pieces were falling into place. That afternoon, I rented a scooter and drove to a small temple Ayu had told me about, perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. It wasn't on the tourist maps or featured in guidebooks, just a modest local shrine where fishermen came to pray for safe journeys. I sat on a stone wall, watching waves crash against the rocks below and feeling the spray on my face. In the distance, dark clouds were gathering, the beginnings of a tropical storm that would bring dramatic lightning and drenching rain before clearing to brilliant sunshine again. The cycle of seasons in Bali, so different from Portland's more gradual transitions. My phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. Just heard from Grandma and Grandpa. They're excited about Lakeside Gardens. Dad's already talking about joining the bocce team. Who knew? I smiled, imagining my father, who had resisted the move for so long, now embracing this new chapter with unexpected enthusiasm. Perhaps we were all more adaptable than we gave ourselves credit for. Another message appeared, this one from Megan. Got your email. So proud of you, Mom. Partner in a tour company? That's seriously badass. The casual praise from my daughter, who had rarely seen me as anything other than a supportive background figure in her life, warmed me deeply. She was seeing me now as a whole person, with ambitions and capacities beyond motherhood. A final message came through, this one from Olivia. Just booked my flight to Vietnam. Departure date January 15th. Any chance you'll be in Asia then? Would love to meet up. The confluence of messages seemed symbolic somehow. Past, present, and future all converging in this moment of transition. The relationships that had once felt constraining were evolving into connections based on mutuality and respect. The work that had once felt like an endless obligation now offered challenge and meaning. The identity that had been subsumed by others' needs was emerging with newfound clarity. I typed a quick response to Olivia. I'll be in Ubud January 10 to 20 preparing for high season. Come stay with me before you head to Vietnam. Then I put my phone away and turned my attention back to the horizon, where the storm clouds were drawing closer. There would be rain soon, but I wasn't worried. I had learned to appreciate Balinese storms for what they were: temporary, cleansing, necessary for growth. As the first heavy drops began to fall, I remained where I was, face tilted toward the darkening sky. The woman who had once rushed to take cover at the first sign of disruption now welcomed the wildness of the approaching storm, understanding that some transformations require upheaval before renewal. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from the moment I'd impulsively decided to rent out my family's rooms to this cliff edge overlooking the Indian Ocean. It hadn't been a straight path. There had been doubt, guilt, confusion, and occasional backsliding into old patterns. But there had also been joy, discovery, connection, and a growing trust in my own capacity to navigate change. The rain intensified, soaking my clothes and plastering my hair to my face. In the distance, lightning illuminated the churning sea. I closed my eyes and spread my arms wide, embracing the moment in all its intensity. This, too, was part of the journey, learning to stand firm in the storm, knowing that clarity would follow. 6 months later, I stood in my new apartment in downtown Portland, surrounded by moving boxes. The space was small, just one bedroom with an open kitchen and living area, but the wall of windows offered a stunning view of the city and, on clear days, Mount Hood in the distance. More importantly, every item inside represented a deliberate choice rather than an inherited obligation. The sale of the family home had gone through smoothly. My parents were now settled at Lakeside Gardens, where my father had indeed joined the bocce team, and my mother had discovered an unexpected talent for watercolor painting. The proceeds from the house had been divided 3 ways: 1/3 to my parents for their retirement needs, 1/3 to a trust for Ryan and Megan's future, and 1/3 to me. That final portion had allowed me to purchase this apartment outright and still have funds for my new life divided between 2 continents. I had just returned from Bali 2 days ago, completing a successful 3-month high season with Ayu. Our partnership had flourished, expanding from simple walking tours to specialized cultural experiences, cooking classes in family compounds, Art workshops with local craftspeople, meditation retreats in remote temples. We had even hired 2 additional guides to handle the increasing demand. My phone rang, interrupting my unpacking. It was Megan. "Mom, how's the new place? All moved in?" "Hardly," I laughed, surveying the sea of boxes. "I'm wondering why I kept so much stuff when I clearly managed fine without it for months." "That's what storage units are for. Delaying the inevitable confrontation with your possessions," Megan said wisely. "Listen, I'm coming to Portland next weekend for a conference. Dinner Sunday night?" "I'd love that," I said, warmed by the casual way she suggested it. Not as a duty or obligation, but as something she genuinely wanted. After we hung up, I continued unpacking, setting aside items for donation that no longer fit my new life. The process was therapeutic. Each decision a small act of intention. Each discarded object a release from the weight of the past. My doorbell rang just as I was breaking down empty boxes. I opened the door to find Olivia standing there, tanned from her months in Vietnam and sporting a new, shorter haircut. "Surprise!" she exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "I just got back yesterday and had to see this place. Also, I brought housewarming gifts." She held up a bottle of wine and a small paper bag that emanated delicious aromas. "You're a lifesaver," I said, ushering her in. "I haven't had time to grocery shop yet." As we settled on my new sofa with banh mi sandwiches and wine in mismatched glasses, the only ones I'd unpacked so far, Olivia surveyed the apartment with appreciation. "This is so you," she declared. "Not the old you that everyone expected, but the real you. I can feel it." Her observation made me smile. "I think you're right. For the first time, I've created a space that reflects who I am, not who I thought I should be." "And who are you now, Sarah Thompson?" Olivia asked, raising her glass in a toast. "World traveler? Businesswoman? Digital nomad?" I considered the question seriously. "All of those, I suppose. But mostly I'm just present in my own life, fully engaged in my own story rather than a supporting character in everyone else's." Olivia nodded approvingly. "That might be the best definition of success I've ever heard." We spent the evening catching up, sharing stories of our respective adventures abroad. Olivia's work with the literacy program in Vietnam had been challenging but deeply rewarding, and she was considering extending her involvement through remote consulting. "I never would have had the courage to do this if you hadn't blazed the trail," she admitted as she was leaving. "Watching you transform your life gave me permission to reimagine mine." Her words stayed with me as I continued settling into my new home over the following days. I hadn't set out to inspire anyone. I'd simply reached a breaking point where the pain of remaining the same outweighed the fear of change. Yet somehow, that personal decision had created ripples far beyond what I could have imagined. Ryan came by the apartment the next day, ostensibly to help with the remaining unpacking, but really to show me the new app he was developing. A platform for connecting travelers with local experiences. "I got the idea after visiting you in Bali," he explained, swiping through prototype screens on his tablet. "There are tons of apps for finding hotels and restaurants, but not many that help you connect with locals who can show you the authentic culture." I listened with genuine interest as he outlined his vision, offering suggestions based on my experiences with IU's tour company. It struck me how our relationship had evolved. Ryan now valued my input not just as his mother, but as someone with relevant expertise and insights. "What do you think?" he asked when he'd finished his presentation. "Too ambitious for a first project?" "Probably," I admitted with a smile. But so was renting out our house and flying to Bali. Sometimes ambition is exactly what's needed. He grinned, looking briefly like the little boy who used to run to show me his science fair projects. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." The following weekend, my parents came to see the new apartment. It was their first outing from Lakeside Gardens without a specific appointment or errand. and I took it as a positive sign that they felt comfortable enough in their new situation to venture out. "It's small," my father commented immediately upon entering, looking around with a furrowed brow. "But I suppose that makes sense if you're gone half the year." My mother was more diplomatic. "It's lovely, Sarah. So much light. And the view is spectacular." She wandered to the windows, gazing out at the city spread below. "I can see why you chose this place." I served them tea in my small dining nook, watching as they gradually relaxed into the unfamiliar space. My mother noticed a framed photograph on my wall, one taken by Ayu of me standing in a rice terrace at sunrise, arms outstretched, face tilted toward the golden light. "You look so happy there," she said softly. "So free." "I was," I confirmed. "I am." "Your father and I have been talking," she continued, setting down her teacup carefully. "We've been thinking that maybe, when you go back to Bali in the fall, we might come for a visit, just for a week or so." I nearly choked on my tea. "You want to come to Bali?" My father cleared his throat. "Well, Dr. Patel at Lakeside says travel is good for cognitive health in seniors. Keeps the mind active, creates new neural pathways." I bit back a laugh, recognizing this as my father's way of expressing interest while maintaining his practical persona. "I'd love to show you Bali," I said sincerely. "Ayu and her family would be thrilled to meet you." As they prepared to leave, my mother paused at the door. "We're proud of you, Sarah," she said, her voice uncharacteristically emotional. "It took courage to do what you did." The admission, so simple yet so profound, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. All my life, I had sought my parents' approval through obedience and reliability. Now, ironically, I had finally earned it through an act of apparent rebellion. "Thank you," I managed, hugging her tightly. "That means more than you know." The weeks that followed took on a pleasant rhythm. I worked remotely for the tour company, updating our website, responding to booking inquiries, and developing marketing materials. In the evenings, I explored my new neighborhood, discovering small galleries, interesting cafes, and a community garden where I secured a small plot. I also cultivated a new habit, saying yes to experiences that intrigued me, regardless of whether they fit my previous self-concept. I attended a pottery workshop despite having no artistic talent. I joined a hiking group that tackled challenging trails in the Columbia River Gorge. I volunteered at a literacy program similar to the one Olivia had worked with in Vietnam. Each new activity introduced me to different people who knew me only as I was now, not as the eternally accommodating Sarah of the past. These fresh connections were energizing in a way I hadn't anticipated, free from the weight of history and expectation. One evening, as I was having dinner alone at a small Thai restaurant I'd discovered, a man at the next table struck up a conversation about the book I was reading, a memoir by a woman who had spent years documenting traditional weaving techniques in Southeast Asia. "I just returned from Thailand last month," he explained, his eyes lighting up with shared interest. "The textile traditions there are fascinating." His name was David, a professor of anthropology at Portland State University, recently returned from a research sabbatical. Our conversation flowed easily from textiles to travel to the challenges of dividing one's life between different places. "It's like living in translation sometimes," he observed. "Not just between languages, but between entire worldviews." I nodded, struck by the accuracy of his metaphor. Yes, exactly. And yet somehow that in-between space becomes its own kind of home. When he asked for my number at the end of the meal, I experienced a moment of panic. Dating had not been part of my reinvention plan. I had been so focused on reclaiming my independence that the idea of sharing it, even partially, felt threatening. But then I reminded myself of my new practice, saying yes to experiences that intrigued me. And this intelligent, thoughtful man with laugh lines around his eyes and a genuine interest in cultures beyond his own definitely intrigued me. "I'd like that," I said, surprising myself with my certainty. Over the following weeks, David and I met for coffee, for walks along the riverfront, for exhibits at the art museum. Our connection developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared interests rather than urgent need or convenient proximity. He listened attentively when I spoke about Bali and my partnership with Ayu. I found myself equally invested in his stories about his research and his relationships with his adult sons. "So you'll be going back to Bali in October?" he asked one evening as we shared a bottle of wine on my small balcony. "For how long this time?" 3 months, I confirmed. "Through the end of the year, then back here for the rainy season." He nodded thoughtfully. "That's quite a commute for a relationship." The word hung in the air between us. Relationship. We hadn't defined what was developing between us, and part of me had been avoiding the conversation. "I know it's not conventional," I said carefully. "My life isn't structured for conventional relationships anymore." David smiled, his expression open and untroubled. "Conventional is overrated. I spent 20 years in a conventional marriage. That made both of us quietly miserable because we were more committed to the idea of stability than to our own growth." His honesty disarmed me. "I don't want to lose what I've found," I admitted. "This sense of autonomy, of charting my own course." "Why would a relationship with the right person require you to lose that?" he asked simply. The question stayed with me long after our evening ended. Why indeed? Perhaps because every previous relationship in my life, with my parents, my children, even my ex-boss, had involved some degree of subordinating my needs to others. The idea that connection could enhance rather than diminish autonomy was still novel to me. When October arrived, bringing with it Portland's first serious rainfall of the season, I prepared for my return to Bali with mixed emotions. I was eager to reunite with Ayu, to feel the humid tropical air on my skin, to immerse myself in the vibrant spiritual practices that had become an important part of my life. But I was also, for the first time, feeling genuine regret about leaving Portland and the connections I had built there. David drove me to the airport, our goodbye both sweet and melancholy. "I'll see you in January," he said, kissing me one last time before I headed to security. "And maybe, if my department approves my research proposal, I might even visit you in Bali for a few weeks after the semester ends." "I'd like that," I said, meaning it deeply. The flight to Bali was familiar. Now, the length no longer daunting, the routines of international travel second nature. When I emerged into the warm night air at Denpasar Airport, Ayu was waiting, her face breaking into a wide smile as she spotted me. "Partner," she called, embracing me with unrestrained affection. "Welcome home." Home. The word resonated as we drove through the darkness toward Ubud, passing sleeping villages and the occasional late-night warung still serving customers. Bali was indeed home now. Not my only home, but a vital part of my expanding definition of belonging. The high season was even busier than we had anticipated. Our reputation had grown, and we now attracted clients not just through online bookings, but through referrals from previous participants. Ayu had hired a third guide, a young man named Wayan who had studied tourism in Australia before returning to his village, and we had expanded our offerings to include specialized experiences for families with children. My days took on a pleasant intensity, greeting new tour groups in the morning, leading them through carefully curated experiences throughout the day, then handling administrative tasks in the evening. I still stayed at Kadek's family guest house, though I now rented a slightly larger room with a small kitchenette and a dedicated workspace. One evening, as I was updating our booking calendar, I received a surprising email from Ryan. His app development was progressing well, and he was seeking partnerships with local experience providers in various destinations. Would Ayu and I be interested in being among the first listings when the platform launched? The request represented more than a business opportunity. It was tangible evidence of how far our relationship had evolved. Ryan was approaching me as a professional peer, recognizing the value of what I had built in this new phase of my life. I forwarded the email to Ayu with a note explaining the connection. Her response came quickly. Your son follows your path of innovation. Yes, we should support this. Family and business together. Very Balinese approach. In mid-November, true to their word, my parents arrived for a visit. I had arranged for them to stay at a comfortable hotel with modern amenities, concerned that the more authentic guesthouse experience might be too challenging for their first exposure to Bali. To my surprise, however, they quickly declared the hotel boring and asked if they could move to somewhere more real. We didn't come all this way to sit by a pool that could be in Florida, my father grumbled as I showed them around Ubud on their second day. We want to see how people actually live here. Ayu, amused by their unexpected enthusiasm, arranged for them to stay in her family compound, where they would have a private room but eat meals with her extended family. It was a level of cultural immersion I would never have thought them capable of, yet they embraced it with remarkable openness. Your mother has been learning to make offerings with my grandmother, Ayu reported to me one afternoon, clearly delighted. And your father is teaching the village children to play baseball using coconuts and bamboo. Watching my parents navigate this entirely unfamiliar culture with such willingness to engage, I realized I had underestimated their capacity for growth. Like me, perhaps they had been confined by patterns and expectations that no longer served them. Like me, they were discovering that new beginnings were possible at any age. On their final evening in Bali, we sat together on the terrace of a small cafe overlooking the jungle. Fireflies blinked in the darkness, and the distant sound of gamelan music floated on the warm air. I understand now, my mother said softly, breaking a comfortable silence. Why you felt you had to come here. Why you couldn't go back to the way things were. My father nodded in agreement. There's something about this place that puts things in perspective. Makes you rethink your priorities. That's exactly it, I said, touched by their perception. Bali didn't change me. It just created the space for me to recognize changes I already needed to make. My father reached across the table and patted my hand awkwardly, a rare gesture of physical affection from a man who had always expressed love through practical support rather than demonstration. Well, we're proud of what you've built here. It's impressive. Coming from him, it was high praise indeed. After my parents departed, the weeks leading up to Christmas passed in a blur of activity. We had specifically designed holiday experiences that showcased how Balinese Hindus respectfully engaged with Western celebrations, creating a unique cultural fusion. These specialty tours were fully booked, keeping all 3 guides and our support staff constantly busy. On Christmas Eve, I received video calls from both Ryan and Megan, who were celebrating together in Seattle for the first time in years. They showed me the decorations, the food they had prepared, the gifts waiting to be opened. Then Ryan turned the camera to reveal a surprise. My parents were there too, having flown directly from Bali to Seattle to spend the holiday with their grandchildren. We didn't tell you because we wanted it to be a surprise, Megan explained, her face glowing with happiness. First Christmas with all of us together in ages. We just wish you could be here too. The familiar pang of missing family celebrations was there, but it was tempered by something new. The knowledge that I had made a conscious choice to be where I was, doing work that fulfilled me. Not because I was fleeing obligations or rebelling against expectations, but because I was living in alignment with my authentic self. I'm exactly where I need to be, I assured them, and so are all of you. That's what matters. After the call ended, I sat on my small balcony, watching night fall over the rice fields. In the distance, I could see the lights of a ceremony, at a local temple, pinpricks of brightness against the dark silhouettes of palm trees. The air was heavy with the scent of frangipani and incense. My phone buzzed with a message from David. Thinking of you tonight. Research proposal approved. Bali in February looking very likely. Missing you but happy you're where you belong. I smiled, typing back, missing you too. Can't wait to share this world with you. Portland also feels like where I belong now. I'm getting used to having multiple homes in my heart. As I set down my phone, a sense of profound contentment washed over me. Not the passive contentment of resignation or the numbing contentment of routine, but the dynamic contentment of living deliberately, of having made difficult choices and found them to be the right ones, of having risked security for fulfillment, and discovered a deeper kind of safety in authenticity. The final days of the year brought a surprise visitor, Olivia, who had extended her work in Vietnam and was taking a brief holiday in Bali before returning to her project. I couldn't be this close and not see you in your element, she explained, as we embraced at her hotel. Plus, I've been following your tour company on Instagram, and those Rice Terrace hikes look amazing. I arranged a private tour for her with Wayan, wanting to give her the full experience while I handled a larger group's final day. When we reconnected that evening for dinner, her face was flushed with sun and excitement. I get it now, she said, her eyes bright with emotion. What you found here, it's not just the place, though it's beautiful. It's what happens when you finally give yourself permission to live on your own terms. It's not always easy, I admitted, thinking of the complex logistics of my divided life, the occasional loneliness, the persistent guilt that still sometimes surface despite my best efforts. But it's mine, my choice, my path. That's what makes it beautiful, Olivia insisted. The authenticity of it. On New Year's Eve, Ayu invited me to join her family for a special ceremony at their local temple, followed by a feast at their compound. As midnight approached, we gathered in the courtyard, where an altar had been set up with offerings of fruit, flowers, and incense. Ayu's father, a dignified man with kind eyes, addressed the assembled family in a mixture of Balinese and Indonesian that Ayu quietly translated for me. He spoke of the year past and the year to come, of the importance of harmony between people, nature, and the divine realm. Then, to my surprise, he turned to me. Sarah has become part of our family, he said, inclining his head respectfully. She bridges worlds, helping others understand our ways while respecting our traditions. In the new year, may she continue to find her path illuminated by good spirits. The simple blessing moved me deeply. As the temple bells began to ring, marking the transition to a new year, I felt tears of gratitude welling in my eyes. 1 year ago, I had been standing in my parents' kitchen in Portland, feeling invisible and taken for granted, scrolling through images of a world that seemed forever beyond my reach. Now I stood among friends who had become family, in a place that had transformed from an escape into a second home, with a life divided between continents, but more whole than it had ever been. The journey had not been straightforward. There had been fear, guilt, missteps, and moments of profound doubt. There had been relationships strained and then gradually healed. There had been financial calculations and practical compromises. But through it all, there had been a growing certainty that I was finally living my own story, rather than a supporting role in someone else's. As the celebrations continued around me, music playing, children laughing, elders offering blessings, I silently renewed my commitment to this path I had chosen. Not because it was perfect or without challenges, but because it was authentically mine. In the year ahead, there would be tours to lead and a partnership to nurture with Ayu. There would be a new apartment in Portland to fully make my own. There would be evolving relationships with my children, my parents, with David. There would be new skills to learn, new places to explore, new aspects of myself to discover. And through it all, There would be the knowledge that had transformed everything, that it's never too late to rewrite your story, to claim your right to adventure, to become the protagonist of your own life. That sometimes the most courageous act is simply to say, "This is my time now." As the first moments of the new year unfolded, I accepted a glass of sweet rice wine from Ayu's brother and raised it in a private toast to the family who had left me to house sit, to the rooms I had rented out, to the leap of faith that had brought me to Bali, and most of all, to the woman I had become in the process. The woman who had finally learned to put herself on the itinerary of her own life. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.